Hello and welcome to the GrowVC Everyone Funding Startups podcast. This week I'm your host Paul Higgins and I'm joined by Joe Twist, who is the CEO of the UKIE, which is the Association for UK Interactive Entertainment. Joe, thanks for joining us and welcome.
Hello.
Let's start off by just getting a bit of background on you and what the organisation does. Where did you come from and what is the organisation for, the association?
Okay, so UKIE, as we pronounce it.
UKIE, sorry.
Yeah. It sometimes sounds very Japanese. I have an alert for UKIE on Twitter, and there's loads of Yuki-san. But UKIE represents the games industry in the UK, both developers and publishers. And we recently rebranded from ELSPA about a year and a half ago to be the UK Interactive Entertainment Association. So that means we're kind of widening our reach in terms of because games are sometimes quite an unhelpful term. You know, we know what a game is, but what's it's bigger than that now. You know, interactive entertainment is everywhere. So we represent we're a membership organisation, so we represent over 97% of the games industry in the UK. I came from quite a mixed background. I've always been in digital media. I was commissioning at BBC for multi-platform content for entertainment. And that included looking after things like Strictly Come Dancing, which was the bane of my life. I don't really like Strictly Come Dancing. But The Apprentice, and there I commissioned some two-screen activities, so where you're playing along or doing things on a second screen while you're watching. I then moved to Channel 4 Education, where I was commissioning digital content there for 14 to 19-year-olds.
Okay.
And majority of our £4 million budget was spent on games, because we realised that games in themselves are fantastic learning systems, and they encourage young people to think about consequences of decisions and actions that they take. So it doesn't matter really what the subject matter is, it's about learning how to learn, and more especially, I guess, learning how to fail, which is something that kids don't really get taught in schools. Because obviously in a game you're trying something and that doesn't work, and you try something else and that doesn't work, and you realise what your strategy should be. So I think games are a great metaphor for life in that way. So, but before that, I've been a technology journalist in the past. I started my career at Newsround, which is the BBC's kids news programme, which is still going out. And before that, I was an academic, so I did a PhD on young people and online communities and identity.
Fantastic. It's interesting the way you talk about gaming and things, because in the startup world we see people talk about what they call gamification an awful lot.
Oh, I hate that word.
Do you?
Yes.
Go on.
Well, gamification's interesting because obviously reward is a great motivator, and people have latched on to game mechanics, or what they think are game mechanics, and they're not really true game mechanics. It's literally just the carrot and stick approach. And there's this thing around extrinsic and intrinsic motivations around human, psychology. And what gamification does is it really sort of tries to make people do that they inherently don't want to do, and that's the extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is all about actually people are enjoying this and they get rewarded for the fact that they're doing it. So they're not doing it because they're getting rewarded, they're doing it and getting rewarded. Okay. So I think there are some really good examples of gamification. I struggle to find them, but there are some pretty kind of clumsy application of what people think are game mechanics to making people do things they don't really want to do. So it's quite an unhelpful term.
Interesting.
Most of these kind of words that we attach to things are quite unhelpful. Like transmedia is another one. Right.
Okay. So we came across you because you wrote a crowdfunding report in February. What prompted you to write that?
Well, we'd been looking at this was just before I joined. UKIE was looking at crowdfunding. Nesta's been looking at crowdfunding. Creative Industries Council has been looking at it, and obviously crowdfunding has been around in fact, crowdfunding was around. It's what helped fund the building of the Statue of Liberty. You know, crowdfunding is not new. However, the technology and the platforms and the ability to distribute either, you know, things that you get when you donate some money, so whether it be a copy of the game or a copy of the film or whatever it might be, the platforms and the technology had now caught up. And, you know, Kickstarter is the classic great example. I remember when I was at Channel 4, I used to trawl through Kickstarter looking for really interesting documentaries and really interesting film ideas, and it's just, you could spend hours looking at all the really interesting things there. So we recognised this as we saw that increasingly a lot of game studios, startups, wanted to try and plug their gap in funding, which is a big problem for startups. So you know, you've bootstrapped to a level, and you need to build a prototype of your game, and we had a British example in Six to Start who used Kickstarter to fund their Zombies Run game, and that was very successful. So we started looking at this as, well, this is, we recognise that within the games industry and other industries, but I'll just talk about the games industry, you know, that gap in funding is an extremely important one to fill. I mean, we do all sorts of work with companies, you know, trying to look at what kind of R&D tax credits they can reclaim, for instance. But of course, that doesn't apply. That kind of cash flow doesn't come to you unless you're already trading. So it's a really difficult one. So we looked at this, and we worked with Osborne Clarke on the report, and we made this a major part of our budget submission to the Chancellor. And I mean, in fact, I saw Ed Vaizey yesterday, and he's extremely interested in crowdfunding as you know, an innovative way to access finance. So we're going to be pushing this report, and really what we were trying to say in it is that in the UK legislation exists to protect consumers, quite rightly, but again, that legislation hasn't really kept up with developments and technologies and platforms like Kickstarter and CEDO, which is a sort of a European example. And so we have found that there are just very minor secondary tweaks to legislation that need to be made to enable crowdfunding to operate in a way that's outside a donations model if you want it to be. So, for example, if you want share of equity or share of profit, and currently the legislation makes it quite difficult and quite clunky in order to do that. It's possible to do, but it's very, very, you know, sort of complicated. And it means that you end up just crowdfunding from a very, very small group of people, which isn't really a crowd. And it also means that currently it means that, you know, you have to go through a huge vetting process of people who are who want to invest. And what we want is really to open up crowdfunding as a potential for all companies, not just games companies, obviously, and even for community projects, so that ordinary human beings can as they have been doing with other projects on Kickstarter, ordinary people can either choose to just donate or actually get a share of profit or a share of equity if they want. Kickstarter, when we were literally just signing off this project, Double Fine Studios in the US put up their Kickstarter project to make their point and click adventure. And that was just compelling to watch, because literally I was signing off, reading the last final draft of the report, thinking, and then reloading the Kickstarter project page and seeing the money just skyrocket up. You know, and I think they surpassed their target in 8 hours, and that's astounding.
Amazing, isn't it?
But there are special sort of things around that case that happened.
So, I mean, you talk about a couple of different models for crowdfunding in your report. You talk about the sort of donations model and the lending model and the investment model. Is there one of those that, you know, your members would be kind of better advised to look at, or do you think it's?
I think it's. I would never sort of say look at this one in particular, but we're focusing in on the tweaks that can be made around the collective investment model, because that's where a lot of the difficulties currently in terms of legislation arise. So, you know, again, it's very sort of easy tweaks, and we're also proposing, that